The Galactic Council chamber was a grand, domed structure filled with species from every corner of known space. Ornate banners hung from the walls, displaying the insignias of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. At the center of it all sat the High Chancellor, an amphibian-like dignitary with a bloated, self-satisfied expression, flanked by his advisors and the representatives of a dozen species, each one more arrogant than the last. The air hummed with the sound of translated voices, murmurs of amusement rippling through the assembly as they waited for what promised to be an amusing distraction. The human representative had requested an audience, something that alone had caused no small amount of amusement. Humans were new. Their homeworld had only recently been deemed relevant enough for the Council to acknowledge, and even then, only as a curiosity, an upstart race with a strange fixation on violence and personal space. Ambassador Michael Carter stepped into the chamber with measured strides, his black diplomatic suit crisp, his expression unreadable. He looked around, the vast hall, his gaze sweeping over the gathered officials. Some aliens whispered to one another, undoubtedly making unflattering observations about the humans' unremarkable physicality. Compared to the towering armored Vrogan enforcers or the multi-eyed serpentine Tylithians, Carter looked almost absurdly plain. The amusement in the chamber grew. "Ah, Ambassador Carter," the High Chancellor croaked, barely hiding his smirk. "A pleasure to have you here. I must say we were surprised by your request for an audience. Humans are not usually so bold." There was a polite ripple of laughter. Carter smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. He strode forward, placing a small data pad onto the central table. The Council's amusement faltered just slightly. Humans did not usually come bearing files. Humans came bearing guns. "A pleasure, Chancellor," Carter said smoothly. "I appreciate your willingness to meet on such short notice. I'd like to address a recent incident involving one of your fleets." The Chancellor waved a webbed hand dismissively. "If this is about that regrettable misunderstanding in the Sol sector, I assure you, it was nothing personal. Our exploration fleet merely secured an uninhabited system for you attacked our home." The words cut through the chamber like a blade. The laughter stopped. Carter tapped the data pad, and the holographic display activated, projecting a rotating image of Earth's moon. Only it was different. Burned, scarred. Massive craters that hadn't been there before marred its surface, unmistakably the result of an orbital bombardment. The room fell into an uneasy silence. The Chancellor blinked. I was under the impression the system was unclaimed." Carter arched a brow. "Oh, you were under the impression? Well, that's a relief. For a moment, I thought your fleet intentionally glassed one of our colonies." He leaned forward slightly, voice dangerously even. "Just curious, how many unclaimed planets did you bomb before this one?" A reptilian diplomat to the right of the Chancellor, a representative of the Tarvax Dominion, clicked his fangs. Together in annoyance. "Ambassador, we failed to see the issue here. Your species has been slow in declaring sovereignty over your space. If this was truly your colony, why was it not registered with the Council?" Carter exhaled sharply through his nose, a sound dangerously close to laughter. "Right. So your defense is that because we didn't send you the proper paperwork, you thought it was okay to start launching orbital strikes." He glanced at the High Chancellor. "Do you understand how insane that sounds?" A massive armored warlord from the Braxian Confederacy chuckled, his four tusks shaking with amusement. "Come now, human, your species is young. This is how the game is played. The strong expand, the weak retreat. The galaxy has always functioned this way." Carter smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "That's funny," he said, "because that's not how we see it." He tapped the data pad again. And a second hologram appeared. This time it was footage. The counselors leaned in as the display flickered to life, revealing security recordings from the attack. Alien warships descending upon the lunar colony, unleashing waves of plasma fire onto civilian habitats. Cries for help, desperate evacuation, attempts. Then the unexpected. The footage shifted to the Tarvax flagship's bridge, where their admiral barked orders. Before the feed abruptly cut to static, the Chancellor's skin paled several shades. What happened to that fleet? Carter sighed, rubbing his chin as if debating how much to say. Well, see, that's the thing. You thought you were attacking an undefended colony. He tilted his head. Turns out you weren't. A third projection flickered into existence. This one was from a different perspective, grainy but unmistakable. Human ships. Not the fragile freighters the Council expected, but sleek, black warships lurking in the darkness of space. There, railguns warming up. The next moment was a blur of kinetic rounds, shredding through the alien fleet with mathematical precision. Carter watched as several council members physically recoiled. "We didn't broadcast this footage," he said casually. "Didn't see the need. Frankly, we thought you'd just noticed that one of your most advanced fleets suddenly stopped existing. The Braxian warlord, so smug mere moments ago, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. You're lying. If humanity had warships capable of this, we would have known." Carter leaned forward, resting both hands on the table. "Would you?" He let the question hang in the air before straightening. "Because, from where I'm standing, it seems like the only thing you knew was that humans were weak, helpless, a species you could toy with." He tapped the table. "You don't think we noticed when your exploratory fleets started getting bolder? When misunderstandings started happening closer and closer to our borders?" Silence. The first true silence the council chamber had ever seen. Carter exhaled, his smile fading. "So here's the thing, Chancellor," he said, voice quieter now. "I didn't come here to ask for an apology. I didn't come here to negotiate some diplomatic resolution. I came here to deliver a message." The High Chancellor swallowed thickly. "A message?" Carter nodded. "Yes. We know what you did. We know why you did it. And now—" He paused, straightening his tie. "Now we get to decide what happens next." The chamber was deathly still. Somewhere in the back, a small, insectoid diplomat let out an audible gulp. And for the first time in galactic history, the Council began to understand something they had never truly considered. They had no idea what humanity was capable of. The silence in the Galactic Council chamber stretched on, thick and suffocating. Ambassador Michael Carter stood at the center, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. The gathered representatives, many of whom had spent centuries bullying weaker species into submission, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The High Chancellor, his once bloated confidence now somewhat deflated, cleared his throat. "Ambassador Carter, I'm sure we can discuss this like rational beings. There's no need for—" Carter held up a hand, cutting him off with the casual authority of someone who absolutely wasn't here to discuss anything. "Oh, we're rational, Chancellor," he said, voice calm, almost amused. "If we weren't, this conversation wouldn't be happening. You'd just be watching your core worlds go dark one by one." A few of the more warlike species bristled at the remark. A hulking, armor-plated warrior from the Braxian Confederacy let out a low, guttural growl. "You overestimate your kind, human," he rumbled. "The Council stands united. If you think your fleet, assuming you even have one, can challenge the combined might of our empires, then you are either suicidal or profoundly ignorant." Carter turned to him, tilting his head slightly. "That's funny, because I was just about to say the same thing about you." The Braxian warlord opened his mouth, but before he could launch into whatever chest-pounding threat he had prepared, Carter tapped his datapad again. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a battlefield. Not a simulated one, not some abstract tactical projection, but real, raw footage. A planet smoldered beneath a blackened sky. Alien warships, council warships, lay scattered. Across the surface, some half buried in craters, others reduced to little more than burning wreckage. The camera panned, and there, moving through the ruins like wraiths, were humans. Not just soldiers, operatives. The room tensed as they watched. The humans in the footage weren't clad in bulky power armor or lumbering forward with overwhelming firepower. No, these were ghosts. Their weapons were sleek, their movements precise. They darted from cover to cover, using terrain as if they had personally designed it. A squad of Tylithian shock troopers, renowned for their multi-ocular targeting systems, never even had time to react before the humans cut them down in perfect synchronization. The footage continued. Stealth, strategy, psychological warfare. The humans didn't fight like a traditional army. They fought like a species that had mastered the art of war in all its forms. A nervous cough broke the stunned silence. The High Chancellor's skin had taken on an even paler hue. "Well, where was this taken?" he asked hesitantly. Carter glanced at the footage, then back at the council. This was from a little experiment." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "See, some of your member species, specifically the ones who just finished laughing at us, tried to set up a containment zone near our outer colonies. You know, just in case we got too ambitious." He shrugged. "Well, we noticed, and we decided to run a little test of our own." The image shifted again. Now, a council command center came into view, a fortified structure meant to withstand orbital bombardment. The footage zoomed in, revealing something truly unsettling, not a single human soldier in sight. Yet one by one, council officers collapsed where they stood, struck down by unseen hands. The Braxian warlord's tusks twitched. "Impossible," he muttered. Carter's grin widened. "Yeah, you'd think so. But see, while the rest of the galaxy was busy building bigger warships and heavier armor, we were diversifying." He tapped his temple. "Turns out, winning wars isn't just about who has the largest fleet. It's about who controls the battlefield, who controls the fear." The footage cut off. Carter let the silence linger for a moment before stepping forward. "Your mistake was thinking we were like you, that we played by the same rules." His eyes swept across the chamber. "We don't. We never did." A reptilian diplomat finally found his voice. But you never displayed this level of military sophistication before. We have studied your fleets, your ground forces." Carter laughed. "Ooh, you studied us? That's adorable." He leaned against the table, utterly at ease. "Let me ask you something. If you were a species that just entered the galactic stage, surrounded by empires that measure strength by how many planets they've conquered, would you show your full hand?" The realization hit like a sledgehammer. The Council had never seen humanity's true capabilities because humanity had never needed to show them. A wiry, insectoid representative clicked its mandibles nervously. "So, what do you want, Ambassador?" Carter folded his arms. "Well, that depends." He gestured toward the High Chancellor. "See, you made this mess. You attacked our home. You sent warships to bomb a colony you thought was undefended, and then you laughed about it." He smiled thinly. "But we're generous. We're willing to let bygones be bygones." Hope flickered in the Chancellor's bulbous eyes. "You are." "Sure," Carter said. "All you have to do is surrender." The hope vanished. A cacophony of outrage erupted across the chamber. The Braxian warlord slammed a fist against the table, denting the metal. The Tarvax representative hissed in fury. The High Chancellor sputtered. "Surrender, that's absurd. The Council does not..." Carter shrugged. Cool, then we'll just do this the hard way. He turned to leave. Wait, the Chancellor called, desperation creeping into his voice. You can't seriously expect us to bow to a single species. Carter paused at the doorway, glancing over his shoulder. Bow? Nah. He grinned. I just expect you to survive, and right now, that's looking less and less likely. Then he walked out, leaving the Galactic Council to contemplate, for the first time in its long, unchallenged history, what it truly meant to fear. Ambassador Michael Carter had barely stepped off the council, on Chamber's grand platform, when his earpiece buzzed. Michael, came the familiar voice of Admiral Hayes, crisp and efficient as always. Tell me you didn't just declare war in the most dramatic way possible. Carter smirked, making his way toward the diplomatic shuttle. I wouldn't say declare war, more like strongly suggested it. You suggested it with a loaded gun to their heads. Metaphorically speaking, Carter replied, then paused. Well, mostly metaphorically. A tired sigh came through the comms. Please tell me you didn't break protocol. Admiral, I gave them an option. If they're stupid enough to pick the wrong one, that's on them. Carter glanced back at the Grand Chamber doors, still sealed shut, as the panicked voices of alien diplomats argued inside. My bet? They'll double down? Of course they will, Hayes muttered. They've spent centuries bullying smaller species. They don't know how to handle someone punching back. Carter reached his shuttle, stepping inside as the pilot gave a silent nod. Speaking of punching back, he said, strapping in, what's the status on Operation Deadbolt? Hayes was silent for a moment, then, you really want to know? Would I ask if I didn't? Another sigh, this one with a hint of amusement. Let's just say we've been busy. The holographic display on the shuttle's console flickered to life, revealing a classified feed. Carter's smirk widened. The Council thought they were facing the same Earth they had spent years surveilling, an Earth they assumed was behind in military development, always a few steps slower than the galactic superpowers. What they didn't realize was that while the Council had been building bigger fleets and posturing in their grand chambers, humanity had been preparing. The footage showed sleek, angular warships, not the clunky, civilian-grade vessels the Council had assessed, but something altogether different, black-hulled, radar-absorbent, with weapon arrays that made even the most advanced alien dreadnoughts look outdated. Carter could practically hear the admirals at the Council reviewing this footage and collectively sweating bullets. What's their status, he asked. Phase 1 is complete. Fleets are already mobilized near the rim. And our special guests? No chuckle came through the line. Ah, yes. Our good friends from the Spec Ops division are already in play. A few of the more overconfident Council species are going to wake up to some very unfortunate surprises. Carter leaned back, enjoying the idea. You ever hear the phrase, play stupid games, win stupid prizes? Hayes snorted. I think we're about to teach the galaxy what that means. A notification pinged on the console. A direct message from the President's office. Carter tapped it open and read the short but decisive text. Proceed with all necessary measures. Ensure they regret their choices. Carter let out a low whistle. Well then, I guess we've got our marching orders. They attacked our home, Michael, Hayes said, voice firm. They thought they could get away with it. They're about to learn how wrong they were. The shuttle's engines thrummed as it lifted off, heading toward Earth's primary command station. Carter gazed out at the stars, a slow grin spreading across his face. The Council thought humanity was just another minor player in their grand political game. They were about to learn that humans don't play. Humans win. The silence in the Council chamber was suffocating. Gone was the arrogance, the smug condescension that had dripped from every word spoken when they had first summoned the human diplomat. Now, eyes darted nervously, mandibles clicked in distress, and the once mighty warlords of the galaxy fidgeted. In their seats, like cornered prey, Michael Carter stood before them, utterly composed, his expression betraying nothing but quiet amusement. He let the silence stretch, let them stew in their own unease. Finally, he reached into his coat, slowly pulling out a small data chip. He placed it on the central hollow table, tapped it once, and stepped back. The display flickered to life. First, the footage seemed unremarkable. Various alien supply depots, refineries and shipyards spread across different sectors of council-controlled space. But then, one by one, each location suffered an unexplained failure. Fuel lines ruptured, reactors went critical, entire stations lost gravity and power in an instant. Some footage cut off abruptly, while others lingered just long enough to show the growing panic of alien crews as they realized something had gone terribly, terribly wrong. Carter tilted his head. You may have noticed some interruptions in your supply chains recently. A few of the diplomats shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. The footage continued. Now it was interior surveillance from high-ranking military facilities, classified. Facilities, ones the Council had assumed were impenetrable. Yet here, too, things had gone awry. Doors refusing to open at critical moments, security systems turning against their own personnel, sensitive war plans leaked to unknown parties. In one particularly damning clip, a general of the Carthok Dominion, the species that had led the assault on Earth, was seen clawing at his own throat as the atmosphere in his quarters was slowly vented into space. Carter clasped his hands behind his back. We were never going to meet you on an open battlefield, not at first. We knew that's what you wanted. That's what you expected. You thought you had the numbers, the superior firepower, the logistical advantage. He leaned forward, slightly. But war isn't just about numbers, gentlemen. It's about control. Another tap on the holotable. The display changed again. Now it showed faces, or rather the absence of faces, missing persons reports. High-ranking military officials, fleet admirals, key strategists, all vanished without a trace. The Carthok's supreme war marshal, a hulking brute who had once laughed about humanity's so-called insignificance, was among them. Carter smiled. While you celebrated your victory, your people began disappearing. A nervous ripple passed. Through the chamber, the Trillion delegate, a reptilian creature with bioluminescent eyes, swallowed hard. This is an act of war. Carter turned to him, arching a brow. No. He let the word hang, waiting for it to sink in. War is what comes next. His voice was calm, deliberate. This was our warning shot. A heavy silence fell upon the chamber. The warlords and diplomats, so used to wielding power with impunity, suddenly felt the weight of something they had never truly considered before. Fear. Carter let the silence linger, letting the weight of his words settle over the chamber like a suffocating fog. The assembled warlords and diplomats, once so smug in their dominance, now looked at him as if seeing a predator they had mistaken for prey. Some gripped their seats, others cast nervous glances at one another as if seeking an escape that didn't exist. He exhaled slowly, then spoke in a voice as calm as it was absolute. Now that I have your attention, let's discuss what happens next. Reaching into his coat, he pulled out a slim datapad and placed it onto the hollow table. The screen flickered to life, displaying a simple list. 3 demands. 3 non-negotiable terms. The first is simple. Carter's eyes scanned the room, settling on a Carthok general whose massive tusks had once curled upward in a perpetual sneer. Now they seemed to droop under the weight of realization. Every single official responsible for the attack on Earth will surrender to us immediately. There will be no trials, no bargaining. They will be handed over to human custody. The room tensed, but Carter continued. Second, the Council will issue a formal declaration recognizing humanity's sovereignty over the Sol system. There will be no more debates, no more veiled threats, no more interference. His gaze sharpened. Earth is ours. You will acknowledge this, publicly and permanently. A Trillian diplomat hissed, his bioluminescent scales flickering in distress. This is outrageous. You cannot simply... Carter barely spared him a glance. The third condition is non-negotiable. Every single one of your fleets will withdraw from human space. Now. His voice was sharp as a blade. No lingering patrols, no observers, no ships waiting just outside the system hoping for a second chance. You will leave or we will remove you. The chamber erupted, shouts of protest, of anger, of desperate justifications, but beneath it all was something else, something Carter had expected. Panic. He let them argue for a moment, before tapping the small earpiece resting in his ear. The noise in the room died almost instantly when the holodisplay changed. Live footage flickered to life, showing the dark expanse of space outside the Galactic Council's homeworld, and there, hanging in the void like the executioner's blade, was the fleet. Dozens of human warships, sleek and deadly, positioned just beyond the planet's orbital defenses. Their railguns were already charged, their targeting systems locked onto key installations. Carter folded his arms and surveyed the room with a look of quiet amusement. I assume none of you noticed when we arrived. A Fexari admiral, his chitinous exoskeleton trembling, let out a strangled sound. That's impossible. Our sensors were compromised months ago, Carter interrupted smoothly. Your defense networks, we've had access to them since the first day you declared war on us. The moment I tap this pad, your planetary defense grid goes offline. Your ship's in orbit. He tilted his head slightly. Let's just say their engines are experiencing unexpected technical difficulties. The Carthag general, sweat beading on his leathery skin, finally snapped. You wouldn't dare attack the heart of the Council. His voice wavered despite the bravado. It would bring the entire galaxy against you. Carter took a slow step forward, staring the alien down with an expression that held no warmth, no room for doubt. We are not asking, he said, voice steady. We are telling you what will happen next. The chamber was silent. The mighty, rulers of the galaxy, who had once mocked humanity as weak, now sat frozen, staring at the screen, at Carter, at the undeniable reality before them. One wrong move, one refusal, and they all knew exactly what would happen. The chamber fell into a deep, heavy silence as Carter's words lingered in the air like a death sentence. The once confident, arrogant councillors now found themselves huddled in nervous whispers. Their voices, low and strained, bounced off the cold, polished walls of the room, but they didn't reach Carter's ears. He had already turned his back. On them, his attention focused on the fleet hovering just beyond the Council's homeworld, his expression unreadable. But the fear was palpable. Carter had done the impossible. He had bent the most powerful beings in the galaxy to his will without ever raising a weapon. And now they were left scrambling, a cacophony of self-preservation and disbelief echoing in the chamber. A female Elotarian councillor, her sharp insectoid features twitching with anxiety, was the first to speak up. Her voice was high-pitched and filled with urgency. We cannot allow this to stand. The humans' terms are insulting. They're nothing more than extortion. She looked to her colleagues, hoping for a wave of support, but found only silence in return. A Carthag, his hulking form seated beside her, let out a growl of frustration. We cannot allow a species like this to dictate our terms. The humans... He was cut off by another voice, much quieter but far more calculated. A Tanar warlord, known for his level-headed strategy, leaned forward. His glowing eyes scanned the others with a shrewd look. No, he's right. We cannot simply disregard this. He paused, glancing at the live feed of the human fleet again. The camera zoomed in on the enormous ships, their railguns humming. With deadly intent, the cold, hard reality of their power evident. Humanity has already won. The time for negotiation has passed. The Karthok general shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his once bulging chest sagging. He didn't meet the Tanar's gaze. He had been one of the most vocal proponents of their superiority over humans, but now the bitter taste of reality was sinking in. The mocking laughter he had once given Carter seemed absurd now, a distant memory from a time when the universe seemed much smaller. The room buzzed with anxious deliberation. Some wanted to fight, to retaliate, to strike back at the humans for daring to challenge them. But others, too many now, saw the futility of it. The strength that Carter had shown wasn't just in his fleet, it was in the confidence with which he'd made his demands. He wasn't asking for mercy. He was taking it, and that, more than any weapon or fleet, terrified the Council. They realized too late that they had underestimated humanity in every possible way. And then there was the Elotarian. She hissed with frustration, her antennae twitching erratically. "This is madness! They've humiliated us, humiliated me!" The Tanar's voice was soft, almost pitying. "Your people were never in danger of being humiliated, Elotarian. Your pride was." He turned his eyes back to the live feed. "But the humans? They're not interested in pride. They want results." The Karthok general, who had previously laughed in Carter's face, now lowered his gaze. His tusks no longer jutted forward in defiance. His posture, once stiff and commanding, had slumped. There was no defiance left in him, only fear. He glanced over at Carter, who remained unmoving, confident, and deadly. The realization was dawning. They had no choice but to bow to humanity's demands. The muttering gradually died down as each councillor came to the same conclusion. Their options were running thin. They could fight and lose everything, or they could accept Carter's terms and retain their power, at least for now. The moment of reckoning had arrived, and it was the Tanar who finally spoke again, his voice calm but unyielding. "We have no choice. We accept the humans' terms." The rest of the councillors went silent, and one by one they nodded in reluctant agreement. Carter didn't move as they deliberated. He had no need to rush. He knew they would come to this conclusion. In the end, power wasn't about how much force you could wield. It was about understanding when and how to wield it. The Council had been too blinded by their own arrogance to realize that humanity's greatest weapon was not its military might, but its resolve. When the final verdict came, Carter gave a single nod, turning toward the door. His voice was low, almost reflective, but the weight of it carried across the room. "Next time," he said, pausing before stepping through the doors, "before you attack another species, ask yourselves if they might be human." And then, without another word, he walked out, leaving behind a council that had just learned a lesson they would never forget. As the doors slid closed, the chamber was left in stunned silence. The alien warlords, the diplomats, the mighty rulers of the galaxy, all sat motionless, processing the seismic shift that had just occurred. The universe would never be the same, and they knew it was their own fault.